This is Frau Troffea. On the 14th of July, 1518, she walked out of her house in Strasbourg, stood in the middle of the street, and started dancing. There was no music. There was no festival. Nobody had asked her to. Her husband stood in the doorway and begged her to stop, and she couldn't. She danced until the sun went down, and she collapsed. Then she got up the next morning and did it again. And within a week, 34 other people had joined her, and none of them could stop either. This is the dancing plague of 1518. It is one of the best documented events of the entire medieval period. It happened to hundreds of real people in a real city. And to this day, nobody can fully explain it. But that's not even the strangest part. The strangest part is what the authorities decided to do about it. Let's set the scene. Strasbourg in 1518 was a free city in the Holy Roman Empire, and it was not having a great decade. There had been famine, crops had failed, prices were brutal, and on top of that, the city had recently been hit with waves of disease. This was a place where a huge number of people were hungry, exhausted, frightened, and deeply religious. Hold on to that, because it matters later. So, July 14th. Frau Troffea steps into the narrow cobbled street outside her half-timbered house, and she begins to dance. And I want to be clear about what this looked like, because dancing makes it sound fun. It was not fun. Witnesses described people twisting, jerking, and hopping with a kind of desperate intensity, sweating, screaming, and begging for help, while their bodies just kept going. Frau Troffea danced for around 6 days. By the second morning, her feet were swollen. At some point, her shoes were soaked through with red. She would collapse from exhaustion, sleep, and then get up and start again, apparently against her own will. Now, if you had seen this happen once, in one woman, you'd assume it was a personal medical emergency, but here's where it stops being one woman's problem. People came to watch, and some of the people who came to watch started dancing too. Within a week, 34 dancers. Within a month, contemporary accounts suggest as many as 400 people. 400 in a city where you could walk from one end to the other in 20 minutes. Entire streets full of people jerking and spinning and stumbling, unable to stop, for weeks. So the city council did what any responsible government does in a crisis. They convened, they consulted the best medical minds available, and they produced a plan that was so confidently, catastrophically wrong that we're still talking about it 500 years later. Here was the medical thinking of the time. Everything was explained by the 4 humors. The idea that your body ran on 4 fluids, and illness meant they were out of balance, and the consensus diagnosis for the dancing was hot blood, overheated blood, too much heat trapped in the body, causing the frenzy, and the logical treatment for trapped heat, obviously, was to let it out, which meant the afflicted needed to keep moving until the heat burned off. The official medical prescription for people who could not stop dancing was more dancing, and they did not do this halfway. The council cleared out the guild halls so the dancers would have space. They built a wooden stage in the open air. And, this is my favorite part, and it is in the city's own records, they hired professional musicians to play for them, to keep the rhythm going. There is a line in the Strasbourg council minutes, sitting in an archive, that is essentially an expense report. 2 florins for the musicians who played for the dancers. Somebody filed that, somebody approved that budget. So picture it, you have a public health crisis in which hundreds of people are physically unable to stop moving, some of them collapsing, and the official government response is to build them a stage, hire a band, and turn it into a venue. This is like responding to a house fire by installing better airflow. You can guess how it went. The music didn't calm anything down. It advertised it. Now there was a beat, a stage, and a crowd, and more people joined. One chronicle describes a cobbler who left his workbench mid-stitch and simply walked out to the square. The council had accidentally built the world's worst nightclub, and it was booked out for weeks. Eventually, somebody worked out that this was going badly, and the city performed one of history's great policy U-turns. All public dancing and music were banned outright until September, which, in a culture where communal dancing was genuinely central to social life, was a serious move. The Chancellor of Strasbourg, Sebastian Brandt, who fittingly had written a famous satire called The Ship of Fools, helped draw up the exception for weddings, and the exception is oddly specific. If respectable people want to dance at a wedding in their own home, they may, but only with stringed instruments, no tambourines, no drums. Because apparently, the official position was that a drum beat might set the whole thing off again, but a lute is fine. Then they tried the other approach, God. The dancing was blamed on Saint Vitus, a saint who was believed to curse sinners by forcing them to dance uncontrollably. So the dancers were loaded up and sent to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus in the nearby town of Saverne. There were rituals with holy water, incense, crosses painted onto their bodies, and, a detail I genuinely love, red shoes. And in September, the remaining dancers were taken up a mountain to a shrine to beg forgiveness. And then, roughly 2 months after it started, it stopped. As mysteriously as it began. There is one more character in this story, and he's the reason I have trust issues with the 16th century. 8 years later, the most famous physician and alchemist in Europe, Paracelsus, visited Strasbourg and investigated. And after careful study, the great man delivered his conclusion. Frau Troffea faked it. His theory was that she'd started dancing deliberately to embarrass and humiliate her husband, and that she hopped and sang to sell the illusion. And then other women, seeing how well the prank had worked, started doing it too, to annoy their own husbands. That's it. Hundreds of people, weeks of chaos, a citywide emergency, and the leading medical mind of the age looked at all of it and concluded, women being dramatic. So what actually happened? Honest answer, we don't know, and anyone who tells you they're certain is selling something. The leading theory is that this was mass psychogenic illness, a real documented phenomenon where extreme sustained stress produces genuine physical symptoms across a group. Remember the famine, the disease, the fear? Add a population that sincerely believed Saint Vitus could make you dance as a punishment, and you have the conditions for a belief to become physical. The other popular theory is poisoning, ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye and can cause hallucinations and convulsions. It's a satisfying explanation, but it has a problem. Ergot poisoning tends to cause seizures and cut off blood supply to the limbs. It doesn't really let you dance, coordinated, for 6 days. And one last piece of honesty, because I'd rather be accurate than dramatic. That the dancing happened is not in dispute. It's in the council minutes, the chronicles, the sermons. But the death toll you'll see quoted everywhere, usually 15 a day, comes from later chronicles rather than the city's own records, and historians argue about it. People collapsed. People were injured. Some very likely died. But the neat number is shakier than the internet makes it sound. What we're left with is this. For 2 months in the summer of 1518, hundreds of people in a European city danced until their bodies gave out. Their government responded by hiring them a band, and the smartest doctor alive decided it was a marital dispute. History doesn't always give you an answer. Sometimes it just hands you the receipt for the musicians.